Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we are continuing our study of the Minor Prophets by talking about the book of Habakkuk. And as you can see, we're still in the family Bible class studios and not in our 5 good minute studios. And that will be true probably for the duration of our conversation about Habakkuk. We started to introduce the book today. We want to begin to get into the text a bit today, but we do still have some more introductory material that we would like to talk about. I want to talk a bit about just the form of this book and the genre of it. It is a prophecy. In fact, part of it is called an oracle, and a prayer, and a song, and it's also wisdom. It's all of the above. We established these categories to try to manage our information about the Scripture, and that's okay. We make up categories for everything. But let's never forget that these are human categories. And so when we read the book of Habakkuk, he is a prophet, and he says in verse 1 he's delivering an oracle. But chapter 3 is called a prayer. But then again, it has musical notation, so it's a song. But the book as a whole is really a piece of wisdom literature because it's about God's righteousness and about our response to God's righteousness, and that God is righteous when he does what he does, even though it's not what we want him to do. And so it's all of the above. This book was very important to the Qumran community, the community that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls. In fact, the oldest of the Dead Sea Scrolls is the text of the book of Habakkuk. And, they were an eschatological community. They were a community that they were looking forward to the coming of one or two messiahs, depending upon the text that you're looking at. And they were looking forward to casting off the bonds of their own Babylon. In the New Testament, especially in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation and other places, Rome is seen as a type of Babylon. And the Babylonian Empire really was the jewel of empires, and that succession of empires. It was not as ruthless as the Assyrians. It was not as rich or as large as the Persian Empire. But the Babylonian Empire, as is described in Nebuchadnezzar's vision in the book of Daniel, was the golden head. And so Rome, not only among biblical sources, but other sources, was compared to Babylon. And so it was such an important book to the Qumran community that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I think as we read it, we'll see why. Another good comparison is that God, in the same way that God is going to purify Judaism by using a foreign power to haul the Jews into captivity, God uses the Roman Empire to thoroughly and absolutely smash to bits Mosaic Judaism. It is gone. It does not exist. No one can keep the law of Moses, not the ceremonial law. No one. There are no priests. There's not a high priest. There are no altars sacrificing animals according to the law of Moses. They don't exist. It's done. And it was destroyed in AD 70 by the Roman Empire when they destroyed the city of Jerusalem. It is gone. It's done. And so in the same way that God used an international power to prepare the people for the Messiah, he used an international power to transition his people from the old law to the new and make it impossible to keep the old law anymore because it has served its purpose. Now we observe Christianity. Now we're Christians and we follow the teachings of Jesus. But it's all a piece of the same cloth because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God's will is eternal. So anyway, I think that's an important comparison to make as well. Habakkuk chapter 1 verse 5 will be quoted in Acts chapter 13 verse 41, drawing our attention to the wonders of God, that we're always going to be surprised by God and what he's going to do, which God tells us. That comes from his own mouth in chapter 1 verse 5. God says, you're not going to believe this. You wouldn't get it if I explained it to you, but this is what I'm going to do. And then we also have Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4, the righteous, the just shall live by faith. Such an important verse that's quoted in the New Testament, in Romans and Galatians, in the book of Hebrews. It's such an important verse to Paul and to his co-workers. So anyway, that's another important thing about the book of Habakkuk. We talked yesterday about the fact that it could have been written during the time of Hezekiah, maybe during the time of Manasseh, maybe later, maybe during the time of Josiah. I don't know. But I doubt that it was written during the crucial part of Hezekiah's reign, because it doesn't really mention idolatry in verses 1 through 4. It's going to mention all those sins that were talked about in the book of Micah. And so I think it was probably written at a time when idolatry was not the order of the day, because idolatry isn't really mentioned the way violence and injustice and immorality are. Okay. I'm going to read verses 1 through 4 just to introduce us to the book, and because I promised you we'd get into the text. But we'll start talking about verses 1 through 11, the first question and the first answer next time. Habakkuk chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. The oracle which Habakkuk the prophet saw. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you won't hear? I cry out to you, violence, but you don't save. Why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Therefore, the law is ignored and justice is never upheld. For the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes out perverted. Well, we know right off the bat that we can sympathize, empathize. This is the world we live in as well. Well, we're going to pay a lot more attention to verses 1 through 4 and go through verse 11 next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.